Welcome to the Head Shepherd Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Ferguson, CEO at Next and Agri International, where we help livestock managers get the best out of their stock. Before we get started, a big thanks to our three fantastic sponsors. Allflex, part of MSD, perhaps better known as Cooper's Animal Health in Australia, offers one of New Zealand and Australia's largest livestock product portfolios with a comprehensive suite of animal health and management products. Heininger is a one-stop shop for wool harvesting and animal fibre removal. The Heininger team have a deep understanding of livestock agriculture, backed by Swiss engineering and a family business dedicated to manufacturing the best. Pro-A Livestock Equipment have been delivering industry-leading livestock handling systems to producers across Australia, New Zealand and beyond for the last 25 years to improve on-farm safety, efficiency and profitability. We are grateful to our sponsors for their support, helping us bring Head Shepherd to you each week. And now it's time to get on with this week's episode. Welcome back to Head Shepherd. You're with Ferg as usual. Thanks very much for listening along. Today we have Will Barton back on the show. We had Will a while ago, but we've got him back on to talk about how things are going now, a bit further down the track with their brand, but also navigating some pretty high prices and how processors are handling that, or how Gundagai lamb are handling that. Always great to chat with Will. Before we get into that, a couple of things to mention. We've got our live coming up. It's on May 7th. It's at 8 o'clock NZ time, 6 o'clock East Australia, or 4 o'clock in the West, or wherever else you are in the world. It's about the mineral basics for healthier stock and higher returns. So we're welcoming Melinda Turner to a live event. She did one a while back, or did a podcast a while back, and was good enough to follow that up around the soil aspect of minerals. But this one's wholly focused on that animal angle. It's an area that I know is a bit of a weakness of mine, so I'm really looking forward to hearing from Melinda. It's all of us are kind of wondering whether we should be supplementing with this or that. So a great opportunity to really get to, I guess, right to the heart of it without sort of worrying about snake oil sort of stuff. So yeah, get along to that. Again, that's May 7th at 6 o'clock Eastern time, or 8 o'clock here in New Zealand. Also wanted to mention the Precision Sheep Management Project is calling for people who want to run a research site or demonstration sites. That's opportunities to demonstrate how doing things differently to part of the mob can improve profitability and good outcomes. So jump onto precisionsheephq.com is the home of that project. Or if you jump onto any of AWI, MLA, or our socials, you'll see it being promoted at the moment. That is a pretty tight window. It's closing in a couple of weeks. So if you do want to be involved in that project, it's sort of go time, jump on, find out. It's just an expression of interest at this moment. You're not locking into anything, but and obviously we work with you to work out which of the different protocols you'd like to run in terms of what you want to find out more about on your farm. But a really great opportunity to work with industry leaders and researchers on your particular farm and on problems or solutions that are perfect for you. All right, we'll get underway with this week's show with Will Barton from Gundagai Lamb. Welcome back, Will, to Head Shepherd.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me.
That's great to have you here, mate, and great to catch up on the latest at Gundagai Meat Processors. I guess we've had a chat before, and I thought it'd be a good opportunity just to learn what's changed since that previous chat. It's an interesting time in the world, really. There's probably record meat prices, record fuel prices, a few things lining up to be headwinds and tailwinds and all sorts of in between. So yeah, I mean, maybe we'll start with I guess just where you're at in terms of all the producers listening will be loving having high prices, but I'm sure you're not loving it quite as much.
It's interesting. I think probably for every producer that's enjoying it, there's one that's pretty nervous about the levels they're at. And certainly in our supply chain, there's a bit of that kind of nervousness about not wanting to get back to where we got to in 23. And we think a lot about that in our business, about trying to address that volatility, because it is obviously very challenging at the moment. The dynamic we've got is that we've got, processors chasing volume and driving prices up rather than necessarily the, consumers demanding the product and driving the price up. So that's a little bit challenging in the sense that, it's probably not a genuine consumer-driven signal as much as it is, processors sort of fighting it out to keep plants operational. And I think we're at a point now where this winter we'll see some sort of fairly widespread, reduction in volumes. We're already seeing it across the industry and some shutdowns, reduce shifts and all that sort of stuff, which will, hopefully level the job out again. And I guess the other thing that's a bit crazy about it all is that just when all of that's going on and you've gone through a year with new tariffs and all sorts of stuff, then you pile war in the Middle East on top of all of that, which makes it just a little bit nuts. And, I think there's a lot of the old cliche about sort of, uncertainty being the new certainty and all that kind of stuff. We don't change the business model or sort of respond to those events as much as we just try to keep really diversified in what we're doing and sort of stay true to the brand promise and follow that kind of methodology. If you've got a good product that's great and it stands up, you'll be well placed through time. Yeah, but it is a crazy, crazy time.
Yeah, there's no other way to describe it. I've heard, I think, on social somewhere, you're talking about how in these times of high prices, you do squeeze like a premium brand. So you've obviously gone out on a limb to create a premium brand, but then at the current prices, everything's a premium price. Does that put pressure on, I guess, that brand? I guess you just keep sticking true to the brand and the people that are enjoying it. But
yeah, I think it does. It certainly from a short-term point of view, it puts pressure on a brand and it puts pressure on the category generally, because if you've got a category that's quite expensive already, lamb, and you try to make it more expensive, and the big challenge that we've got as an industry rather than as a brand personally is this concept that you're kind of selling everything as a fair average kind of expression of what Australian lamb has to offer. And I think when you build an industry that way, you also give people an average experience. So sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not so good, and everything else. So the big test for our brand really is as we come off this cyclical high pricing kind of scenario, is just how well our brand and our products sort of holds up in the down cycle. And we think we've done a pretty good job over the last 5 years of sort of scouring the ends of the earth for the right kind of supply chain partners that are willing to pay for the effort we go to in terms of our engagement and feedback with producers, in terms of the eating quality outcomes that we can stand behind consistently. And so that creates a real test for our supply chain in the next sort of 2 to 3 years as we go through that next cycle, because we haven't been through a full cycle with an established brand, which is what we've got now. So that's exciting for us to see how well that works. But I think on a whole, the challenge for industry is that you're pushing the price of everything up to a point that's beyond what consumers really want to pay. They're kind of in this dynamic at the moment that they're paying it because they kind of know they have to, but they're not necessarily 100% comfortable with the levels it's got to, and everyone's kind of waiting for a bit of relief. And if you don't have a differentiated product through the cycle, I think that's quite dangerous for a lot of supply chains, and obviously something we're working really hard to avoid in our supply chain. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I guess as long as they're viewing it as in relativity to fuel prices, you'll be fine. But if
well, which they are, and it's always really interesting when you're talking to the partners, the people we're selling meat to around the world, and what they're experiencing out of the proteins, and they're obviously trying to make informed decisions about their expectation of what their consumer wants, whether that's a retail diner, a restaurant diner or a retail shopper. And so you're all kind of learning together what's the limit to which you can push this as an acknowledgement from those partners globally that they can look up online and see what the heavy lamb indicator is doing or the trade lamb indicator is doing. So there's a consciousness about it, but we are in uncharted territory, so it becomes challenging for both us and our customers to understand what's a reasonable price point for product and how much of that is a consumer willing to sort of part with when the takeaway coffee price has doubled in the last 5 years and all the other things they're dealing with, diesel, everything else that's going on. You're trying to find a new level, I guess, for what's reasonable in the context of the current inflationary cycle, if you like. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I guess if we get back to things we've got a little bit more control over and talk about, I guess, the brand itself and how, I guess what you've seen has that continued to grow. I mean, we spoke last time, it was not even infancy, but you were getting going, and I'm hearing sort of stories here and there of people really enjoying the brand. Is that momentum has continued despite some of those headwinds?
Yeah, it has, and pleasingly, the momentum is what carries you. And I'm talking before about the next test for the brand being the next cycle. The last 5 years, every year has been significantly different to the one before in terms of the number of lambs we're procuring, the scale of the business generally, the markets we're in. This year is probably the first year we're going to do something like repeat last year in terms of the kind of producers we're procuring lambs from, the number of lambs we're processing, the markets that we're in. So we're certainly not at maturity by any stretch, but we are getting to a point where you can kind of look at 2 years as being, broadly sort of like for like. Somebody asked me in the last week whether we can see an increase in the average intramuscular fat of our lambs because we're incentivizing in the grid for intramuscular fat and for this, the GLQ scoring system that we have. And the first few years, we have seen an increase, but it's somewhat masked by the proportion of lambs each year that are new. So not everyone that's sending us lambs has been doing it for 5 years and is actually making adjustments to their selection criteria or, what they're doing on farm. There's obviously a group of people that have been doing it very actively for that 5 year period, but there's still a lot of newcomers. So we're starting to, I think, after 5 years, come into the next 5 years will be a phase of really seeing, what on a producer side, what the evolution of that feedback starts to mean. Mm. And then on the consumer side, the momentum that comes with just continuing to be in market, that's you just can't shortcut it. And so the calendar turns over again, and the same people call back, and you build relationships, and you get those sort of shared experiences and values, and it always takes 5 years longer than you want it to take, and that's certainly true of this brand. But we are getting to a point now where there's definitely momentum carrying us in what we do.
I guess when you set up GLQ, you would have had an informed. I was going to say guess, but slightly better than
we thought we had an informed.
Yeah. So, if you had your time again, are the parameters that you missed? You obviously are building a brand, so therefore the parameters you put into that brand are what's working. Is there other things that you're sort of look to add, or is there things that you kind of aren't really shifting the dial for you? Or?
I think that it's interesting. We've used everything that's been available to us as we did things.
Yeah.
And whether or not they've been sort of the right things in the right order, or like one of the things I'm really glad we did. So we were part of kind of the MLA's push to install DEXA X-ray units in the plant, which would have been probably 2016, 17 when it was in its infancy. And I'm really glad that I learned about the challenges that having a supply chain built on a product like Viascan, which was all yield, no eating quality. I'm super glad that we looked at that and we really need to pursue eating quality somewhere. And really the catalyst for us getting involved with MEQ and going down the path of getting a hot measurement or a hot prediction of intramuscular fat was really based on a desire not to incentivize farmers to grow something lean without balancing the eating quality. So I think we got that right. I think in the early years we were paying a bonus just for intramuscular fat. So I think that was something that we learned after a season we really needed to balance with lean meat yield. And we also incorporated animal health, and I think that was a good move to change from one model to another. MSA wasn't available when we started. Like I often wonder now would our journey have been different if, the cuts-based model and had been built and ready for commercial launch in 2020 when we started, would we have gone down the path of building the GLQ score? And I think that that'll be something that complements the brand. And some customers will want that and others may not, or may be comfortable with ours. So I think those things have been the right call at the right time with what was available to us. We're only just now about to launch our feedback portal, some really good data analysis about the cost of animal health conditions that we're picking up. So actually to get it back to the farm gate and say, but for this animal health condition, you would have got the 80 cents per kilo bonus. And so putting that into dollars and cents and getting some analytics in is quite exciting for sort of what's next.
Yeah.
Point of view. Yeah, but I think overall on the journey, I don't think I'd change a lot. And I think to myself, I wish I'd known it was going to take 5 years. If you knew it was going to take 5 years, I would do it. So it's good to be ignorant of these things sometimes.
Exactly.
And my board might not have said yes there.
Yeah. No, you got to just tell the board you're going to have a hockey stick and it's in that flat year, and 2 years' time we'll be flying and all that.
That's right. That's right. The eternal optimist.
I've got considerable sort of 10-year overnight successes at the moment. So understand that completely.
It does, without question, make it so much more rewarding though, because they're things, and I'm sure it's the same for you, that you're very passionate about and you believe strongly in. And so when they actually do come off, or you can start to see them really, gain some traction, there's sort of nothing better really. It's exciting.
Exactly. And I'm sure you know it, or whether you do or you don't, but I mean, a little old meat processor in Gundagai that, is pretty much there's not any circles you're in these days that don't know what you're up to. So it's, obviously not that that's your target market, I suppose, but obviously everyone's aware of what you're doing and have really led from the front, from the bleeding edge as it probably is. But hugely appreciated by us out here. I've heard about a lot of the things that you do for a couple of decades, but no one else has put it all into practice, which is what's so exciting from this side of the ledger anyway. I guess the latest part of that innovation is EID being implemented so that you can routinely know which animal's doing what, which takes us from mob-based sort of data to individual data, which is, in my world, the most exciting thing you can have. Talk us through that journey and where you're at.
Because it's important to note that for the last, since 2020, 2021, so sort of about 5 years, we've provided individual carcass feedback. So, we've given producers a body list that's got hod standard carcass weight, and then it's associated with the intramuscular fat, the lean meat yield, and any animal health conditions in that animal. So that's sort of hook tracking for us is quite old. It's been done for 5 years at sort of 99.9% accuracy, and it works. And the reason it works is we've got an automatic chiller system that needs that information to sort it into different groups. And so if it didn't work, we'd be in all sorts of trouble. So we were kind of forced to make it work. We didn't have the option to say, we'll fix it next week, or we'll get to it when it makes sense. And we've obviously got a payment system for carcasses where we need to pull all that information together into the individual hook to be able to pay. And so there's a lot of insights that you can get from just knowing that all the lambs that were a little bit lighter also had a tendency to do this with lean meat, we call that with IMF, or all those sorts of things. So that kind of richness has been there for the whole time. What's really changed in the last month here is that we can, without going into the wand on a special occasion to scan an EID, with 100% confidence now scanning every single carcass and matching it to the EID. And there's a few reasons why it's taken us till now. One is it's hard, and you need the right people, and we've got those people. But the other thing is we didn't have many to practice on. So it's been mandatory in Victoria, but we process like less than 3% or 4% of the lambs that come through here are actually from Victoria. And the proportion of New South Wales lambs over the last few years that have had an EID is not many at all. So it hasn't really been until sort of this year's cohort of lambs that are coming through the spring last year that we've had a high frequency of lambs to actually test and iterate. So it's sort of been a 6-month process really in earnest. Because it could have been 3 weeks between EID tagged mobs in this plant prior to the mandated position. And so I think a few things have come together at once. Mandating EID, the kind of rise of, the Internet of Things on farms, and, in paddock weighing systems like OptiWeigh and others, auto drafters, and, the data capture that's happening with those in terms of, weight in the yards and veterinary treatment and all of that sort of activity has meant that bringing it online now is much more, I guess, relevant because everyone's got an EID. Yeah. And not everyone's capturing individual data on farm, but everyone's got an EID. So the ability to do it is there. So even if you're not capturing information on everything individually, but you might scan 5 for some reason and follow something, you can still get that, which is quite profound. Like if we got there a year or two ago, no one would use it. Well, it'd still be the realm of research trials and all of this. So the fact that we can do it for all animals now is exciting. We're just starting to, talk to some of those in-paddock weighing systems about how to incorporate daily weight gain into our carcass feedback and those sorts of things, which is super exciting for those that are engaged in it. And I'm sure that will drive further insights for the balance of our producer network that's not quite as nerdy, that can benefit, that can benefit from the information you gain from those that are. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess, for 5 years, you've probably been, you've been the best informed of what's actually happening out there because you have had that milk tracking data and those linking up those traits across sheep. But now I guess you've got this new opportunity to even go deeper in that, and with got some of those integrations, it'll be some amazing sort of data you can pull together.
Yeah, and we've got producers, like Isabel Roberts, who split lambs a couple of weeks ago here. One had been, same genetics, same age, for all intents and purposes, very, identical to the extent that lambs can be. And one she'd finished in the paddock with grain, and the other one had been finished in a feedlot. And following the results, both from two different mobs' point of view, which we've always been able to do.
Yeah.
Sort of getting into the weeds about the weight gain of them and what their journeys were individually. And the results were quite surprising. And so those things, and I've said this a few times, but the difference between being able to do that instantly at scale versus setting up a research trial and sort of going, spending a lot of time and effort and having a small sample size versus just saying, oh, we'll give it a try.
Yeah.
And the data is available for everything at scale. Really, with the exception of probably steerforce, we're capturing a lot of the stuff at chain speed that we would have spent a lot of time designing and planning in the past. So that'll help with the acceleration of improvement in the industry.
So much so, yeah. And I guess we've had kind of on the wool side, you could have fleece weight and micron, got a fairly good indication of value of that fleece. And yeah, anyway, there was effort involved, but you could get it done. Whereas, there was sort of no real way of doing that at all, apart from, getting 3 or 4 people to go on the chain and scan ear tags and follow carcasses and make sure what goes on which rail and all that sort of caper. Like, it's a massive job if you haven't got it automated. And I guess we'll get to the LambX showcase in a second. But we've had teams going around the country doing that, but didn't have to at your plant because it was all automated, which is pretty cool.
Another day.
Yeah.
And I think that also, if you a lot of the value for people developing, hardware tech for on-farm applications in with the evolution of kind of machine learning and AI and connectivity on farm generally around things like enabling technologies like Starlink and other things like that. I think that one of the limitations of the application of that is that if it's not linked with carcass data, then it's in some cases, you can go to a lot of effort to be much better on farm, but not actually get a reward or a feedback loop that allows you to keep evolving that improvement. So you get a kind of a one-off result, whereas now you can get this repeatable kind of, I'll just adjust this and go again.
Yeah.
And so I think by having what we're doing on plan, and hopefully other processes will take it up and over time it'll become more common, is that it actually unlocks a lot more potential on farm, because the person that's building something, tech or innovation for on farm, has another reason why it's a good idea to install that on farm. Because not only is it going to improve your productivity on farm or make X, Y, and Z improvements, it also will be able to link to feedback that ultimately should make you more profitable if you're doing a better job. So that's exciting as well.
Yeah, indeed. We were talking a little bit before we started recording. I guess new challenges you had, what you've been measuring, but you're sort of chatting about how you're kind of starting to have to think about measuring other things in carcasses. Do you want to talk us through?
Yeah, I made the comment to you that, like when I listen to sort of producer-focused conversations around and people in seed stock land around sort of balancing genotype and phenotype and, making sure you don't go too far, down one path without checking on the other. And it sort of occurred to me lately that we've always known this to be true, like that we can measure. There's a lot of things we can measure, but we still need to go and have a look at a carcass to make sure that it is what we think it is. And that to me is a little bit like the genotype side of the spectrum. I've got the data, I can analyse it, I can do a million things in a spreadsheet, but there's some traps in it if you're not actually paying attention to what I would consider to be more phenotypical stuff, which is how does the carcass performing? And there's a couple of things that we're working on at the moment with our Dexter installation. One is predicting the cut weights, and the other one is predicting the eye muscle area of the rack, I guess you'd say, the rack. And what the big thing for us is that there's a bit of a trap in the way that we grade carcasses, that you could actually have an animal which is, to use very subjective old-fashioned kind of language, like a leggy merino, which has a really terrible eye muscle area, like small eye muscle area, long carcass, long legs, which if you looked at it in a spreadsheet, you'd say, well, it's got a great lean meat yield, its IMF is really strong. But if you looked at it hanging up, you go, oh, that's not what we want. And so the ability to add a few of those things that have, for us, the way we've managed them historically is been to go and have a look and sense check and be in the chillers, be in the boning room, and breaking it down. That's helped frame a view about what kind of genetics or bloodlines rather, we kind of don't like in the merino context. There might be some we avoid because we know that they're not quite, the modern merino that we're looking for. And, we thinking about buying a model of merinos, we're always talking about need to be very forward in condition. And, there's a few things that sort of are around glycogen reserves on the way in, because we know that merino is a little bit more susceptible to stress in transit, but also a bit more fat coverage, because we know they can, sometimes be a bit lean. And if they're really well finished, they're the best product you can come across at a particular time of the season. So that historically has been a lot of kind of, using your eyes and looking and observing and what have you. Whereas if we can get some of those traits into the objective realm by using DEXA, say, to, estimate weights of racks and eye muscle area and those sorts of things, then we can continue to evolve that kind of objective approach to a carcass and keep picking out the ones, not necessarily dead set curve benders, but ones that we really want to be seeing more of, and then try to incentivize that in the production base.
Yeah.
Yes, so that we don't wander off in the wrong direction.
Yeah, there's so many, as you rightly put it, there's so many sort of lines up with lots of things that we talk about around data. And I think what we do know for sure is if you can put a number on it, you can control it, you can see how it's trending. If you haven't got a number, it's kind of, well, you just wake up one day and you're way over here and you thought, and you didn't know you were going that direction. And I think like everything we do these days, if it's possible to put a number on it, we sort of, to the point of boring most of my people to tears, I'm sure. But we're just so hard on, if we can get a data point, you can track it, and you've got so much more power to shift it.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that we try to keep coming back to is we have devices that have been designed to do certain things. Like DEXA was originally designed to pick up, or as a single energy equivalent, was designed to pick up vertebrae to inform automated cutting, robotic cutting. And then the dual energy X-ray was designed to split the composition between lean meat yield, fat and bone. But what are the other applications of that machine that you've already spent your capital on? And with a bit more research and, the involvement of smart people who are behind, ArmTech and other business, organisations like that, to say, well, what could we do to understand things like cut weight, to understand things like eye muscle area, to toy around with ossification, things that might be ultimately in 5 or 10 years' time be a better proxy, for age than teeth or dentition. And I think we always have to challenge ourselves, because something that wasn't relevant 10 years ago, like if you'd said to someone, we're going to spend $2 million putting a DEXA machine in your plant to predict the eye muscle area of a carcass, you'd say, whereas now you think, oh, it's there. If you could do it, that would be, like, the incremental benefit of that could be quite profound. 10 years ago, you'd say, well, what am I going to do with that on farm? I've got no idea what it was. And now you're like, well, it's full EID.
Yeah.
So if you have any kind of trial or commercial sort of application for individuals, then you might be able to, draw inferences. And so I think that constantly challenging yourself to look at the reasons that prevented you from capturing data 5 or 10 years ago may just not exist anymore.
Yeah. Awesome.
Why don't we do that? We've never done it. Well, maybe it's easy to do now, and you just haven't revisited the thought.
Yeah, and that could be a definitely a sound grab for social media there, I reckon. The speaking of smart people, and you talked about your boardroom before, a lot of this stuff is just straight off the bottom line. You're paying really good people to do smart stuff, to learn more things, to hopefully get into some position of paying it back. How you must be pretty good at talking around the board table, mate.
Yeah, I think I kind of get that from. I've inherited that. That's a Geno side of the equation. That one, but I think my father and my uncle can remember the day that they realised that they needed to employ people that were smarter than them. So as two young men who set up a business in the mid-70s, they remember avoiding employing people smarter than them because they'd be found out as complete imposters and didn't know anything they were doing. And they both would tell you that they can almost tell you the day that they went, oh, that's wrong. Yeah. We're like, that doesn't work. And I think the other thing they can remember is the first time they employed someone whose grandmother they didn't know. And they could nearly tell you the day of the year that happened. Yeah. And I think there's always been an openness in this business to sort of evolve thinking and find other people. And it's remarkable. Again, if you go back to momentum, the momentum you get when you begin to get a bit of a reputation for, wanting to have a go at doing things a bit differently, and you start to attract good people into your organisation to work with you on those things. And, regional Australia can be challenging to employ, meat scientists into different locations and good young people. But when you've been at it for a little while and you stay consistent in what you do, and you sort of behave with a level of consistency, the same is true of the people that you're trying to attract to your team, but also the producers you're trying to get to come back. Like you've got a lot to prove when you start in terms of, you bring out a new grid that's based on weight, lean meat yield, and there's a bonus for intramuscular fat. And, there's probably a fair few examples of small lamb brands that have, started up for a year and then ceased to exist pretty quickly because they can't scale. And so, a lot of the last 5 years has just been kind of earning the right to be, to have a voice and to have lived the experience and to have sort of done it. Yeah, it's very rewarding to have a good crew of people around us that's, I think enjoying it as much as the family is. Yeah.
I think, well, if external view is anything, I think that they do seem to be enjoying it. So I'm sure that's how it's playing out. And I guess you haven't yet experienced the producer side, as in if we go into a time where there is more there is competition for people. But I mean, one of the things we hear about is people trying to get into your grid rather than you having to chase them for lambs, which I think is part of that same equation, that consistency and doing something differently. People just want to be part of that story. I guess initially people want to know what their IMF for their sheep are because they're all convinced they got the best, but
yes,
but they also do genuinely like to be part of something bigger than their own business. I think that's a truism I see across agriculture.
And I don't think, I'd love to think that people are calling us at the moment to scrambling to get into our grid. It's a grind because there's not a lot of lambs around at the moment, and there's a view that there won't be, for at least sort of into spring. And so I think our approach to the high price kind of dynamic that's also, making it very difficult to operate a processing facility is to kind of lean into the things that we know that we have an advantage in. And so we launched about 3 months ago. So the way our pricing is, we publish our grid on a Monday for the fortnight starting on Monday from the day we send it. So at the start of week 1, we're sending out the grid for weeks 2 and 3. And anyone can subscribe to it on our website, and we'll send it to anyone. So you don't have to, have a best man that's married to a vet whose brother's major, who sort of sends you a screenshot of the grid and just go online and we'll send it to you.
That's way less exciting. Mate.
Yeah, that's right. And we do that sort of really routinely every fortnight. If the grid's full, we say that the grid's full, and so here's our grid. Just be aware that it's full. We're just publishing it for transparency. We're not publishing it to try to attract lambs. We're doing it for that reason. And we started about I think it's probably 3 months ago. When we do that, we also publish a 10-week forward grid. So we offer a price 10 weeks in advance. So if there's a producer who's sort of wondering where we're tracking and want to secure the lambs into the space and take away the market risk, then they can act on that. And we offer half the upside to whatever our spot grid price is. So if our grid price is lower, you'll get the grid you're committed to. But if it's $1 higher, then we'll give you 50 cents of the upside. And that's worked kind of quite well. And that's something that we're trying to do to manage volatility, because, I mean, depending on which side of the bed you get out of and depending on what's happened on Truth Social overnight, you never know what the dynamic's going to be. So that's one thing. And we also sent a comparison tool a little while ago to our producers just around kind of what else there is, because there's a grid sort of sweet spot. There's a price for the right weight and the right fat in our value-based marketing grid. But there's also freight. You've got freight, you've got yield. So if you're travelling a long distance, the lambs will probably yield less after a longer journey and a bit of stress. We've got quite a transparent skin sales process where we disclose the cost to process the skin as well as what we sold it for in the tender process. There's a GLQ score bonus. And so, like, we ran an example a couple of weeks ago where the grid price, our sweet spot in our grid, or what we would just refer to as the grid price, was $1 less per kilo, and the producer still ended up $6.30 per head in front overall. And as freight becomes a bigger deal and a higher cost, and all of these things become, and as we can understand a little bit more about what happens in supply chains, then kind of the informed producer or the producer with a rockstar agent very quickly figures out, okay, well, let's just look a bit deeper at these things. Yeah. So that's what we lean into when things become really challenging.
Yeah. It's kind of, you make yourself pretty unattractive to hackers, really. Everything is pretty transparent. There's not anything to really hack in and find out.
I've always just had a view that, like, our competitive advantage shouldn't be our ability to hide information. Yeah. And there are certainly some things that we think are proprietary and things that we've put IP into that don't need to be shared in terms of process or other bits and pieces. But at a higher level, there's a general feeling that the more information that's out there, the better you can engage with your supply chain towards actually working together. Yeah. So if you want to maintain and, I guess, encourage the friction between a producer and a processor, by all means, don't share.
Close the gap, yeah.
Yeah, but for us, and I think there's probably a level of it that's like transparency for transparency's sake. There's an overt transparency to the way we do things. Like, it's not necessary to publish our grid to 1,000 producers every week who subscribe to it, right? No. I can't buy from 1,000 producers in Eastern Australia. Most of them are too far away. But I also don't believe that there's any great risk. And if they're all just going to send it to each other on a group WhatsApp, then why would you send it to them and prove that it's not something that you're focused on trying to manage? Yeah. Which is probably different to the way others think. But it's certainly been part of our ethos since we started the brand.
Yeah, I guess maybe it's a long bow, but an extension of that ethos. I rang you all a long time ago now, probably a few long months ago, but when we were talking about a LambX showcase and wanting to, I guess, extend it from what it was in 2024 to 2026, where it went through a range of processes, and we tried to make it open to a wider geography and tried to make it open to a range of production system. I think you just said yes, regardless of what I didn't even got halfway through asking you before you had agreed to hook in. I guess what about the showcase has sort of made you want to be a participant?
One of the things that excites us about the LambX Carcass Showcase is that since we've started, and because we're sort of on our own in this journey, largely from an industry point of view, producers are always taking a bit of risk sending lambs to us, and because they don't have an IMF probe on farm, and they don't have a DEXA X-ray on farm, and we're paying on both of those things. And so you're really relying on producer has to take a leap because the pricing is not necessarily known. There are things that they can manage, weight, and fat to a certain degree on farm, but there are a lot of things that they can't manage. So and they're taking a bit of a leap. To your earlier point, they all think they're the best before they send them first. But if we could click our fingers and every processor gave the same feedback, then my producers would know with some certainty how their lambs are going to perform in our grid because they get the information for all of their lambs.
Yeah.
And so the thing that I like about the LambX showcase is just the broadening of that. Even if it's much bigger than a nucleus flock trial. So it's got a bit of scale and a bit of diversity, and it's different geographic regions with different producers with different breeds and different sort of production systems. And I just think it allows a wider range of people to understand what it is that they're growing and how it might fit into, the supply chain of the future. Well, the supply chain of the future, at least as I perceive it. And I think that's really good for industry because, we get a lot of calls from people that live a long way away from us that want to send us lambs that we have to turn down because it sort of doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense for us to be buying lambs from, South Australia. So I think it's great for industry to be able to do it at a bit of a scale. And I think also the reality of it is that there'll be lambs that perform incredibly well that people were hoping would perform well and they've put a lot of effort into. There'll be lambs that do really well that no one's ever put any effort into it. It'll be a big fluke, just the same as it was when we started ours. And there'll be lambs that people expect to do exceedingly well. They'll do, in relative terms poorly. And that's just as important to know for improvement in my mind as well. So, I just think it's a good initiative and I'm looking forward to seeing what all the results are.
Yeah, excellent, Sam. And, really looking forward to seeing you and the other processors on stage. It's been great to have joining up with JBS and with WAMCO to the three of you sort of coming together in that showcase. It's been excellent. You don't often see the meat processors playing in the same room, so it's awesome to see that an opportunity to be part of something and be on the stage together with Pete McGilchrist leading it at LambX, which is going to be a great session that I'm sure lots of people are pretty keen to get along to it in Adelaide in a couple of months.
If only he was a bit more comfortable speaking in front of people.
That's right. Yeah. If only he liked the crowd. Yeah.
No, it'll be good fun. I'm looking forward.
Yeah. Excellent. Right, mate. We'll leave it there. We've actually both got to get to another meeting about the LambX showcase, so we'll head over to that one. But thanks very much for your time. Congratulations again on all that you do there. Building a brand is a massive job, and it's great to hear that it's starting to pay off and will do for a long time in the future. Before we do finish up, Will, I'm not sure if we had the opportunity to ask this question last time, but if we did, we'll ask it again. One of the things we ask people is who's the best human you've had the opportunity to learn from? At least to my random shit.
That one's easy for me because it's Dad, and I don't want it to be sort of trite or cliched. But it's interesting for me because it's not necessarily about business. The learnings from Dad are really about people, and he kind of has this positivity and presence. Like he hasn't had an office or a desk in this business for like 10 years, but his presence is really felt. Like he's in the business every day and he's walking around talking and engaging with people and derives a real sort of enjoyment for people. And we sort of touched on it a bit earlier when you said, how do you convince the board or whatever. I've never heard my father say that's not how we do it. It's just not something that I've ever heard. And I think what makes it a bit unique is I'm not sure that there's many meat processors that are characterised by relaxed fathers who tell sons that they can do whatever they want. Like, here's the keys, go for it kind of thing. And that's not to say that there's no checks and balances in what I'm doing, but a genuine desire to, I guess, be really open about what things might be, which is, it's easy for me at times to, because I'm the person that's explaining, and I'm the person on the podcast, right? Not Dad.
Yeah.
But Dad's been really generous in sort of allowing us to do that. And it's not necessarily because it's the best or the easiest business decision, but it is because it's the right thing to do by the people. And there's a sense that that's a good way to sort of live your life and be. So the learnings from that are really, not necessarily business learnings as much as they are people learnings. And I think that, I hope that kind of sort of resonates with the experience that people have with Gundagai lamb in terms of, producers that engage with us and customers that interact with us, is that there's that kind of human-led, values-led approach, and the other stuff will, tend to work itself out. So I feel very fortunate in that sense. Probably doesn't get the limelight he should sometimes. But he's happy enough walking the floor here and just saying good day to people, and that's enough.
Yeah, that's awesome, mate. And those, I guess you're making a point of separating people and business, but that's a pretty difficult thing to do because they're one and the same often. And being good at people is being good at business.
And in family business and in agriculture, and I think generationally, I think it's a bit unique that's been the approach of my father and his brother Tony. That there's been a kind of a view that, well, there's no one particular way that we execute things, and it doesn't have to be done that way. Like the response, I really, really have never ever heard them say, "No, that's just like we don't do it that way. We need to, like that's not acceptable." Or that's like there's plenty of, "Hey, sure, what's the risk?" But there's not. There's not. No. Yeah. There's not. I know how to do it. Yeah.
Fantastic, mate. Yeah. No, I'll look forward to meeting that bloke at some point. And it's great to hear that he's still cruising through. And I'm sure all the people on the floor love having a yarn with him as well if he's that kind of bloke.
He absolutely is.
Yeah. Awesome, mate. Thanks for that. We'll talk soon.
No worries. Thanks, Ferg.
Thanks for listening, and thanks again to our 3 fantastic sponsors. Gundagai, who are proud world leaders in the manufacturing and supply of professional sheep shearing and clipping equipment. Allflex Livestock Intelligence, part of MSD Animal Health, offer extensive livestock product portfolio focused on animal health management, all backed up by exceptional service. ProWay Livestock Equipment offer turnkey solutions from design through to professional installation and specialise in facilities that are tailored to your specific operation for all livestock species. We thank these 3 great companies for their ongoing support of the Head Shepherd podcast.